I want to hand the floor to Dr. Tariq Jagmag. I hope I'm saying your surname correctly. And thank you so much for being part of our meeting today,
Yes,
Dr.
correct.
Tariq. The floor is yours. You're welcome.
All right. So I'll put it on share screen so I can do my little drawings. I hope you all can all see this. Yes, it's just a blank screen. So
Yep.
I'm going to be talking about long COVID today. And what we are using for the treatment of long COVID is a few homeopathics and a few of our meds that we have invented. Now we have international patents on these meds, and we have published papers also in them. So I'll be talking about them and how we go about treating this. So long COVID happens in about 26 to 40% of patients who have COVID. Even patients with mild COVID end up having symptoms of persistent COVID, which is called as long COVID. So the definition of long COVID is if you have symptoms even after your RT-PCR is negative, which persists for more than 12 weeks, that means you have long COVID. So I'm going to be talking about what is the etiology behind this and how we go about diagnosing and treating each one of them. So let's start with just the etiology of it. So there are 5 possible mechanisms that we know of right now. I'm just drawing that. The first one is viral persistence. So there are a few papers which show that in many patients there is persistent COVID which lingers on in the body. There was one case which was in a hospital called AIIMS in India, where after a couple of weeks of the patient becoming RT-PCR negative, he started having dementia. And when they checked his CSF, they found that there were actually COVID viral particles which were present inside his CSF, causing him the dementia. So many patients who have even tested RT-PCR negative after they've recovered from COVID have COVID lingering inside their body. So viral persistence is one of the reasons why patients have long COVID. There's an interesting trial being done by another AIIMS hospital in India called AIIMS Patna, in which the trial is called as the ASCOT trial, in which they're using pulse wave velocity to check the arterial stiffness of patients post-COVID. What they're finding is quite interesting that even after you get mild COVID, there is a dramatic increase in the arterial stiffness of your body. So you can get prone to blood pressure, you can get prone to renal damage, you can get prone to dementia. They are trying various approaches to treat it using vitamin D, vitamin C, they've tried magnesium, they've tried ACE inhibitors, they've tried ARBs, but none of these methods actually work to bring the arterial stiffness down. The trial is called as the ASCOT trial, and the cardiologist doing the trial, he's got an international award for actually doing this trial. So we have methods by which we can actually treat this virus that persists in the body, and I'll be talking about them in detail. The second etiological factor that can cause damage is actually the ACE2 knockout. So since the virus binds to the ACE2 gene, it can actually knock it out. And the interesting effects first are on hypertension, of course, because the ACE2 is going to convert angiotensin into angiotensin 1,7, and angiotensin 1,7 is actually a vasodilator. So the ACE2 starts getting knocked out, you basically are not able to vasodilate and you get vasoconstriction, which is another reason why patients end up getting hypertension. It's not just the arterial stiffness, it's basically the knockout of the vasodilator. ACE2 is also present in your gut, and inside your intestine, it has an interesting role because it increases the absorption of tryptophan. So tryptophan is used to form serotonin, used to form melatonin. Tryptophan is also required for absorbing B vitamins in your body. So when the ACE2 gets knocked off in the gut, guess what you're going to get? You're going to get hair fall, lots and lots of hair fall, which is one of the symptoms in patients who have long COVID. They also get insomnia, they get depression because their tryptophan levels are low. Let's say you give tryptophan to a patient and you give him lots of B complex. Yes, you can correct the tryptophan deficiency, you can correct the B complex, but what about the ACE2 that's knocked off? You're not going to be able to fix that. So what we found that giving low doses of interleukin 10 and these are all manufactured by my company. When we give low doses of interleukin 10, we can up the ACE2 receptor post-COVID, and we can actually correct these patients having depression, hair fall, and many such other issues. We can also bring their blood pressure down. The third important etiology that causes long COVID is autonomic neuropathy. So these patients, because of chronic stress in the hospital and because of COVID has damaged their nervous system, they end up getting autonomic neuropathy. Now the symptoms are very interesting of autonomic neuropathy, and you guys must have seen it. The patient develops sudden palpitations. When you end up getting the EKG or the ECG done, you find that, well, the ECG is normal. But if you put up a Holter monitor on this patient, then you'll actually be able to see those palpitations happening in real time. Now we have a very simple way to treat this autonomic neuropathy, which I'll be talking out again in detail. The third etiological factor that we've seen is these patients have reactivation of Epstein-Barr. We've seen this in hundreds of patients. The patients after COVID end up getting a skin rash. They end up getting dermatitis, for which they do apply corticosteroids, but they don't work. Patients also develop severe gastritis after COVID. Again, Epstein-Barr is usually indicated in that. Many patients post-COVID, if you've seen, end up getting herpes. They get penile herpes. There's reactivation of Epstein-Barr, HSV1, HSV2. Again, we have very simple ways in which we treat this. The last important factor over here is oxidative stress. So what is oxidative stress? There was a doctor who spoke about NLRP3. But you see, when you're targeting NLRP3, which is the NOD-like receptor 3, which with a pyrin domain, you are going to cause inhibition of interleukin 1, you're going to cause inhibition of IL-18. But if you block NLRP3 completely, what you're going to do is you're going to inhibit your innate immune system completely. If you inhibit your innate immune system consisting of IL-1 and IL-18, you will not be able to fight off any viral infection or even a bacterial infection. Oxidative stress is basically in COVID happens due to a gene called NOX2. NOX2 is known as NADPH oxidase. It's present inside your neutrophils. So when your neutrophils want to create oxidative bursts, they increase the expression of NOX2 and then they cause oxidation. Is oxidation useful in the treatment of a viral infection? Not really. You usually require oxidation in the treatment of bacterial infections, but in a viral infection, it's not really required. So then what is the role of a neutrophil in a patient who has a viral infection? Neutrophils actually increase the formation of a type 1 interferon called as interferon beta. Because they increase interferon beta, they drive into the area because interferon beta is the one which removes the viral infection. But this NOX2 activity of the neutrophil, you don't really want it and you want to inhibit it. Increase in NOX2 activity will increase NLRP3, and NLRP3 is a double-edged sword. In many patients with influenza who have diminished amount of NLRP3, they have inability to develop a fever when they get an infection. They don't get a fever. So in such cases, we actually give them low doses of interleukin-1 in order to activate the immune system. You would have seen this. There are many patients who have COVID who have actually low neutrophil counts. They have a low total white blood cell count. And many patients will have an increased white blood cell count. For those who have a low white blood cell count, you actually need to increase interleukin-1 and not decrease it. So these are the various etiological factors that actually end up causing long COVID. Now I'm going to talk about the various symptoms that the patient has and go about describing how we treat it. So let's clear this. I'm going to draw a very rough sketch. My drawing isn't good, so let's start with hair. So patients complain of hair fall, right? This is my version of hair. So in order to treat the hair fall, what we do is we can simply give B vitamins. The entire spectrum of B vitamins is really useful from B1 to whatever. And we also give them a topical. So we have a hair topical that we have manufactured. It has very low doses of capsaicin in it, which stimulates hair growth. We've had cases who've gone completely bald after COVID. The hair is completely regrown after it. So that's just hair fall. And most of these patients with hair fall also have severe anxiety disorders. So keep in mind that the anxiety was because the ACE2 was knocked off in the gut. These patients don't have the ability to absorb tryptophan. So for the anxiety, what we do is, and I can give you a case example after I complete this. We use a homeopathic called as Sepia. This is the homeopathic Sepia 1M. We basically just give them 4 drops of it once a day. It is a regulator of serotonin in your brain. So we had this case in Malaysia. It was an old patient. After COVID, he had dementia and he had Parkinson tremors. Now, this patient was taking high doses of melatonin. And what his daughter told us that when he's on an SSRI, the tremors decrease. When he is on melatonin, the tremors increase. The reason is because melatonin is an inhibitor of estrogen and progesterone. It actually inhibits your sex hormones. So when this fellow was on high doses of melatonin, he was inhibiting both estrogen as well as progesterone in his body. And when you inhibit both these hormones, you actually inhibit the formation of serotonin as well. So what we did is we gave him a dose of Sepia 1M. We stopped the melatonin. And after the Sepia 1M was given, not only did his dementia start to correct off, but immediately his Parkinson's got better. So that's a small little tip over there. The next symptom that these patients have is mainly in their brain. We've seen a lot of patients with long COVID having focal deficits in them. For example, they get drooping of the lip, they get drooping of the eye, they get ptosis of the eye. Now, in these kinds of patients, you do need to do a CAT scan. What you will find is there are focal deficits, there is shrinkage, there's atrophy of the brain. What we have found in these cases is there's usually inhibition of a factor called as epidermal growth factor. So these patients with focal deficits, they have a factor called as epidermal growth factor. It's there in each one of us. This is actually inhibited in them, or it's blocked out. So in cancer patients, when you're giving them drugs like cetuximab, which is an epidermal growth factor inhibitor, the side effect is usually focal deficits in the brain. They have lacunar infarcts. COVID patients also develop the same sort of problems. Again, there's a simple homeopathic here called Silesia. We give this in 1M. And the epidermal growth factor starts fixing itself. Epidermal growth factor is also required to reform your gastric lining and your olfactory lining. So many of these patients complain of severe acidity and gastric ulcers along with the focal deficit. So when the Silesia is given, it fixes the epidermal growth factor, the gastric lining regrows, and these patients have, their acidity goes away. The other symptoms that these patients have is sometimes brain fog. You must have seen many of these patients having brain fog. Now, this one symptom was really interesting for us because it took us quite some time to figure it out. I'll give you some backdrop. We are actually a dermatology pharmacology company where we manufacture dermatology drugs. We also have our own lab. We breed our own rats, and because we breed our own rats, we can do many trials on them. So the brain fog that happens in patients, we found 2 major causes for it. One is, of course, these patients have oxidative stress and they have lower levels of catalase. So when we give them one of our pills called as Imucil, this is a patented thing. We have a US patent and a US published paper also on it in the Journal of Pharmacoimmunology. This one is actually the NOX2 inhibitor. It increases the levels of catalase and these patients have improved brain fog. The other cause that we found of brain fog is very interesting. It's connected to the stomach acid in these patients. And it's also connected to anosmia and parosmia. So I will give you the small example. So we had this patient who had long COVID. She had recovered from COVID. She was a young girl around 20 years of age. She complained of severe brain fog, was not able to study. Whenever she would eat any food, it would taste as if she's eating sewage. So she wasn't able to eat any food at all. She had complete lack of smell, but along with the lack of smell, she was having this severe parosmia. She had extreme fatigue, constant fatigue the entire day. So I said, well, the ACE2 is knocked out. Let me try Sepia on her. It didn't work. After taking history a little bit more, we found out that she also had stomach acidity. She used to complain of acidity. So guess what happens when your tryptophan levels drop in your colon? Your colon actually sends a signal to the stomach, and the stomach decreases acid manufacturing. When the stomach decreases acid manufacturing, the gastric epithelium that is there does not start to regrow. It does not regenerate at its normal rate. The same thing happens in your olfactory mucosa. Your olfactory epithelial cells, which are the supportive cells which are around your nasal structures, which then support the nervous system or the olfactory nerve, they do not regenerate. So when this starts to happen, you not only get stomach acidity, you get extreme fatigue, but you get the symptom of parosmia. So what did I do? I gave her a homeopathic made from hydrochloric acid. It's called as muriatic acid. This was the first case that I did, and after that I did many such cases. We gave her muriatic acid in 1 ml. Again, we just gave her 4 drops once a day. And what happened is after a few days, her fatigue went off, the brain came back online, and the entire parosmia disappeared. Usually what we think of is parosmia as basically like an olfactory lobe epilepsy. So ideally these patients should be on gabapentin. But she did not respond to any of these things. It was only the muriatic acid that corrected it off. So these are the two major things that we are finding with brain fog. One is the effect of the stomach acid, the extreme fatigue, the parosmia, and the next is the depletion of capillaries. If you give glutathione to patients with brain fog, these patients do improve because glutathione is also an antioxidant. But remember, all your antioxidants, whether they are glutathione, vitamin E, vitamin C, whatever, these are the end ones. These are basically taking electrons and just transferring them from one to the other. The actual cause is the gene, is the NOX2 gene, which has been upregulated in your neutrophils. Until and unless you do not inhibit that, you're going to constantly keep developing free radicals, which is why if you have a patient who's glutathione deficient, whose T-bars is high, you can actually measure the level of oxidative stress by measuring the patient's T-bars level, which we do. We find that when glutathione is being given, the T-bars reduces, but the moment we stop, it again goes up until we block the NOX2 enzyme. So this is just about the brain fog. The next thing that we found in the brain is the patients have something, it looks like mental slowing. They have mental slowing. They start becoming very slow. They can't think very well. Now here again, it took us some time to figure this out. And what we found is very interesting. Many of these patients were taking high doses of zinc for COVID. What zinc does in the brain is actually it's neurotoxic in high doses. And if you take high doses of zinc, you're going to get death of your neurons in your brain. These patients who had taken high doses of zinc, who had mental slowing, they also had a very peculiar sensation on the skin. They had an experience like insects were crawling under their skin. Now, these sensations of the insects crawling, along with the mental slowing, told us very clearly that this is zinc poisoning. What we did is we gave them homeopathic called Zincum Met. It's made from zinc, so it's Zincum Met. We gave it in a potency of 30C, again, just 4 drops once a day. And we also measured these patients' zinc to copper ratios. After giving them the Zincum Met 30C, we found that the zinc to copper ratio corrected, the copper became normal. Not only did this patient stop having the mental slowing, but the muscle cramps in the leg stopped. These muscle cramps in the calf muscle are usually caused by copper deficiency. If it's not a PAD patient, it's copper deficiency. So it was the overloading of zinc which was causing it. Okay, so that's one of the causes that we found. Another cause we found of mental slowing, very surprisingly, is fungal infections. These patients, all we would do is ask them to stick their tongue out. When the patient stuck the tongue out, there was a massive thick coating of fungal infection on the tongue. These patients, we just treated them for candida, and yeah, the mental slowing effect went off and they were perfectly fine. Again, in these patients who had severe fungal infections, we found the culprit to be zinc, because zinc is going to worsen fungal infections when even in slightly higher doses. So that's basically on the mental aspects. Let's go to the next one. So I finished the mental aspects, I finished the hair. Let's go to the nose. Now, of course, the nose I've already spoken about. One of the symptoms is parosmia, where the patient has foul smell. But they also sometimes simply have anosmia, where they have just lack of smell. These patients, when we check their white blood cell count, we do a WBC count, we find that the WBC count is usually low. As I'd explained, in many of these patients, it is low. It's not high, unless, of course, they are on dexamethasone where the count has gone up. But otherwise, it's usually low. So for these patients with anosmia, all we do is we just give them a homeopathic called as Natmor. It's simply basically salt water and it restores the cortisol level. As the patient's natural cortisol level gets corrected, the inflammation of the supporting mucosa around the olfactory nerve decreases and the smell comes back. In patients who have persistent anosmia where Natmor is not able to fix it, of course, we give them the muriatic acid, and yeah, the anosmia completely corrects off. Again, keep in mind that the muriatic patients have that severe debilitating fatigue. It's really bad fatigue. Let's go to the next thing. Many patients have cardiopulmonary issues concerning the lungs and the heart. As I said about the heart, these patients have sudden palpitations. They may have sudden bursts of high blood pressure. The ASCOT trial showed that these patients usually complain of high arterial stiffness and severe carotid artery stiffness. So let's look at the cardiopulmonary effects first in concerning the lungs. Many of these patients complain of dry cough. We've seen many of these guys having dry cough. What do we do for these patients with dry cough? There are two ways to go about it. Firstly, we do a methacholine challenge test. Many of these patients have cough variant asthma. They actually have worsening of asthma after COVID, so they have cough variant asthma. If the methacholine challenge test turns positive, that means they definitely have cough variant asthma, and simple inhalation corticosteroids are enough to treat it. But then there are those who are not methacholine positive, so they fail the methacholine challenge test. Okay. Now these patients are particularly just have post-viral cough. For this, when we just give them another medication of mine, it's called an antiviral combo. I'll explain that in detail. Along with Imucil, the dry cough goes away. So what is our antiviral combo that we have? It's basically low doses and it's oral. It's low doses of cytokines, interferon beta, interferon lambda, interferon gamma, lactoferrin, which helps to bring the ferritin down and decreases inflammation, and interleukin 15. One other doctor here was talking about how the NK cells are depleted in patients with COVID, and that is very true. Even we have found this, that there is a massive NK cell depletion in patients with long COVID. It is interleukin 15 which stimulates NK cells. So when we give this combination to patients, we find the dry cough heals off very, very rapidly. Although there are patients who have dry cough that starts after maybe 10 months after recovering from COVID, which means they had COVID, had no symptoms after that, and then after 10 to 12 months, they develop dry cough. Now, these patients actually are getting fibrosis of their lung. They're having fibrotic changes. For those with fibrotic changes, we give them the antiviral combo, and along with that, we give them interleukin 10 again, because it is interleukin 10 along with this which would stop the fibrotic changes in the lungs. Even in our patients with COPD or smokers who have now got lung fibrosis, it is a combination of this antiviral combo along with interleukin 10 which helps them. Now we come to the cardiac symptoms. For those who have palpitations, sudden palpitations, what do we look at? One is we look at the arterial stiffness, they have high blood pressure. So let's do one separate one just for this, for cardiac. First one is high BP. Yeah. These patients have sudden increases in blood pressure. Their BP goes to 160 by 100, 170 by 100. We've had several cases like this. For those who have high blood pressure, how do we treat it? We use this homeopathic called as Cactus in a potency of 1x. We give maybe like 10 drops 3-4 times a day. Sorry, my pen stopped working. So 1x is given and about 10 drops of it 3 times a day. What does Cactus do? So when your blood vessels are inflamed, they start expressing ICAM and VCAM. These are basically cell adhesion molecules. So imagine in this way, the blood vessel is a pipe and these neutrophils and these monocytes are just rolling around mindlessly. And then on the blood vessel, the sticky molecule starts getting expressed called ICAM and VCAM. The neutrophil all of a sudden arrests itself, gets stuck onto the blood vessel wall, and then leaves the blood vessel to enter the tissue space where it produces inflammation. We have methods by which we can actually check the ICAM and VCAM expression on patients, and we find that these are elevated. When Cactus is given, it downregulates ICAM and VCAM, both of them, and you find that the patient's blood pressure starts to drop. Another thing these patients have is they have autonomic neuropathy, not working. In autonomic neuropathy, the sudden palpitations, they have elevated SNS activity. You can measure the ratio between the SNS and the PNS of a patient. When the SNS activity is elevated, you will have sudden bouts of palpitations. For these patients, we use a homeopathic called as lycopodium. We usually use this in a 1 m potency on these patients. Again, about 4 drops once a day or so. When we do this, the SNS activity corrects and this patient's palpitations will go down. The third etiological factor that we found for palpitations is basically post-traumatic stress disorder in patients. Many of these patients have lost family members to COVID or they've seen someone close to them die and they have post-traumatic stress disorder. Very easy to diagnose. In a patient with PTSD, they will have constant flashbacks. They will keep remembering the scene where the person died. So they will have constant flashbacks. In fact, when you ask them, what do you associate your high blood pressure to? They will tell you that I saw someone close to me dying and that memory is still remaining in my mind. For those patients, we use another homeopathic called as Ignatia. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to explain what exactly Ignatia does on the brain. But it's simple to say that we use this again as 4 drops once a day and the patient's palpitations goes away. So I will give you an example of a case of a patient. She is a doctor friend of mine. She had sudden palpitations after COVID. Her blood pressure shot up to about 160 by 100. And when I asked her what exactly has caused your problem, she says that I saw 2 of my family members die. When we checked her SNS activity, we found it to be elevated. She had the classical symptoms of high SNS, which means the patient had bloating and burping. They had dryness of the mouth. The palms became sweaty. The skin became excessively dry. So we gave her lycopodium. We gave her Ignatia. We gave her Cactus. No, actually, we did not give her Cactus because she did not show any symptoms of ICAM, VCAM expression. Whenever ICAM, VCAM expresses not just the blood pressure that increases, patients also develop joint pains. So she didn't have joint pains. So we just gave her these two along with my antiviral combo and Imisul, and within just 3 days, her BP corrected. After about 2 months of this, I think after about a month of this, when her BP became normal, she was off all her blood pressure drugs. Her son had some issues in his school and she developed anxiety because of that. With the sudden anxiety, again, the BP shot up. She had palpitations. This time she said that my face and my legs got swollen with fluid. When a patient says that their legs and face become swollen with fluid, you know exactly the cause of it is usually because their cortisol is increased very high. So we gave her again Natmur. Natmur doesn't just increase cortisol, it can also decrease it. So we gave all 3 of them together, lycopodium, Ignatia, and Natmur. Within a few hours, her BP became normal and the swelling in the hands and the face went off. So this is the complexity when you're treating these patients who have long COVID. Keep in mind that many of these patients have calcifications as well. The calcific index is very high. We have seen patients who have, after COVID, when we get the ultrasound done of their kidneys or we get a CT done, we find that they have these peculiar tram-line calcifications. The renal artery is completely calcified. These cases will have severe tachycardia, will have severe blood pressure, which is uncontrollable. Whenever you want to remove calcification in a cardiac patient, we found that we use this homeopathic called as Calcarea fluorica, Calcarea fluor. We give it in a 30C potency. We just give 4 drops once a day. And with this, your patient's blood pressure will drop to normal within a few weeks of doing this. When you recheck their CT, you'll find that the calcific index has dropped remarkably. So these are a few of the techniques that we use. Of course, there are so many other peculiar cases which I don't have time to get into. But this is the cardiopulmonary issues. There are patients who have severe stabbing pain in the lung after COVID, where they'll point to a rib and they say, I have severe pain over here. This, of course, may just be a pulmonary emboli. The patient may have elevated D-dimer. This is the next thing I'd like to talk about. So how are you treating a D-dimer in patients? Of course, you're going to use your aspirin and many other anticoags. If you've seen in many of the patients, the D-dimer doesn't go down. Why does a D-dimer go up? So D-dimer is just a fraction of your clotting mechanism. You see that in blood. And when you see it, you say, oh, this patient is clotting. But this D-dimer is actually increased when a receptor called toll-like receptor 2 is activated. The toll-like receptor 2 is like a agent which sees a virus. So it's a receptor on your neutrophils and your macrophages, which is able to look at the virus or certain molecules on the virus and say, I think this is a virus or a bacteria, and now I need to trigger my inflammation cascade out. So it triggers interleukin 1, interleukin 18, TNF. All these are good because it's useful, but in many cases it turns bad and it can also increase your D-dimer levels. They are procoagulant by nature. So you need to inhibit this toll-like receptor 2 when you're dealing with elevated D-dimers. Again, the treatment is very simple. There's a homeopathic called sulfur. We use this in a 1M potency and the D-dimer drops like a stone. We've had cases with D-dimers of 10,000, 15,000. There are over 100 doctors in Malaysia who have treated cases using sulfur 1M after me teaching them this. The D-dimer drops. We had a case who was completely paralyzed. After COVID, he was not able to move a single muscle in his body. His D-dimer was over 10,000. Even after Clexane was given to him, aspirin was given to him, clopidogrel was given to him, the D-dimer would not budge. Sulfur at 1M, we just gave 4 drops once a day. Within a week, the D-dimer became normal and he's still alive today. So we use sulfur for elevated D-dimers. For the pulmonary embolism, we found that, again, one of the causes is the patient has depression after COVID. He goes to the psychiatrist and the psychiatrist gives him an SSRI. Whenever you give serotonin to a patient after COVID is gone, serotonin is actually a prothrombotic as well. It actually increases the levels of ADP and thromboxane A2 and can actually form clots. So hence we use sepia in such cases. We don't like to use tryptophan. We don't like to use SSRIs. Many patients who have been on SSRIs do end up getting blood clots. So don't use them. Another thing that can happen is the patient could have a consumptive coagulopathy, where the fibrinogen levels have dropped, the PT-INR has been raised, and the D-dimer has been raised. So the fibrinogen level has actually dropped because the patient is having a consumptive coagulopathy. For this, the line of treatment is different. Unfortunately, I have only 20 minutes, so I don't have enough time to explain it. Okay, let's go to the next part of it. The gastric symptoms I've already spoken about, the low gastric pH. They are not making enough of stomach acid because there's no need for it since they are not absorbing tryptophan. So again, in such patients, there are 2 possible causes. One is an Epstein-Barr reactivation, which causes gastritis. This also happens post-vaccination. My own mother-in-law had severe gastritis after she took the vaccine. We simply gave her my Epstein-Barr medication. We have a low-dose med which actually treats Epstein-Barr. We've got patients negative. They've been EBV, IgM, IgG positive, and after treatment, the EBV has become normal. So when I gave my mom-in-law my EBV med along with my antiviral combo, within a week, the gastritis was gone. She regained her energy. The fatigue went off. Even in patients with long COVID, many of them have Epstein-Barr reactivations. When we treat the Epstein-Barr, the gastritis goes off, the fatigue goes off, the skin rash will go, the genital herpes starts to go away. The next cause, of course, is the low stomach acid, for which we can give muriatic acid, as I said. The patient will have extreme fatigue. Let's say you give these patients betaine hydrochloride. You give them the betaine, you up the levels of stomach acid. Is it actually going to correct ACE2? It's not. Your ACE2 receptor that has got knocked off will remain knocked off. It's not going to fix it. So we need to give them muriatic acid with low doses of my interleukin 10 in order to restore ACE2 activity. If your patient has COVID and you give him interleukin-10, it's going to make his COVID far worse. So it's only to be given in post-COVID patients. Okay. If I've missed out anything, let me see. Oh yeah, many patients have kidney issues after COVID. Long COVID patients have elevated creatinine. Now here's what we found, and this has been super interesting when I teach this. So a lot of patients have been given vitamin D for the treatment of COVID. What is vitamin D doing really? Think about it. Vitamin D is increasing the absorption of calcium and phosphorus. Yeah? It takes calcium and phosphorus and you start absorbing it inside your blood. This phosphorus or the phosphate has to be excreted out by the kidneys. So the kidneys have to remove excessive phosphate out. If you continuously dose the patient with vitamin D, what's going to happen to that phosphate? It's going to start building up. There's going to be a lot of load on the kidney to excrete phosphate. So how does the kidney excrete phosphate? It increases a factor called as FGF23, fibroblast growth factor 23. FGF23 binds to another factor called Klotho, and then you start excreting all this phosphate out. COVID patients are usually deficient in Klotho because Klotho is also the antioxidant used by the alveolar cells in order to stop them from dying. So when Klotho becomes deficient, the patient cannot excrete phosphate and you start having kidney damage. For these patients, all we do is we stop the vitamin D and we put them on Klotho. And within a few weeks, the creatinine goes down and the patient's renal clearance improves. We've had several cases like this. Again, there are about 100 doctors now in Malaysia who are using Klotho on their patients. All of their patients improve in their kidney function. Even in patients who have COVID, when we give Klotho, the cough immediately improves. I think Dr. Juliana there has done the youngest patient. I think her patient was only 3 months old with COVID, where we treated the child off using the antiviral combo. I myself, we did cases who were just a day old, who were born in mothers infected with COVID, and the child had very, very severe COVID when it was born. We just had to give the Klotho and my antiviral combo, and it healed the child off. We also use Klotho in cancer patients. We had an interesting case where this patient had a maxillary sinus tumor. And while doing random testing, I found that there was phosphate in the urine. Now, many tumors of the maxillary sinus express FGF23, and FGF23 is actually a pro-carcinogenic agent as well. So when its levels had increased so much that the patient and the Klotho had depleted so much that the patient now started excreting phosphate in the urine. So when we gave this patient Klotho, the tumor immediately started shrinking. In fact, the eye of the patient the next day opened up because the whole face was swollen. Many tumors, including cancers of the colon, cancers of the kidney, Klotho plays a very important role. So vitamin D is also very circumspect in patients who have kidney damage, and it should be used carefully. Now let's talk about fatigue, the last and the most major symptom that most of these patients have. So fatigue has 3 major causes we found. One is patients who've been on dexamethasone. What happens is that if the DEXA isn't tapered off nicely, they start having depletion in their cortisol levels. The low cortisol means you wake up in the morning feeling really bad. You feel really, really low. You start having sugar cravings in the morning because cortisol usually ups your blood sugar levels. So these are very easy to look at. You just ask the patient, are you waking up in the morning groggy? Are you having sugar cravings? The patient says, yes. Definitely they're having low cortisol. These patients, again, we just give them Natmor and the patient corrects off. Sometimes we also use a homeopathic called as adrenaline. It's made from the adrenal gland, adrenaline. You use it in 3x potency. Usually give 5 drops twice a day along with Natmor. It's about 200 CE once a day. And it corrects all the fatigue. The next is, of course, the elevated NOX2. For this, again, as I said, we use Imucil, which is our patented medicine. It's now sold in UK, it's sold in Malaysia, it's sold all over India. And what about the last bit of fatigue? What is this little bit caused by? So this again is post-traumatic stress syndrome, PTSD. These patients are fatigued because they've experienced trauma. Again, Ignatia is given to these patients and the fatigue will go away. Okay. So this is how we treat fatigue in patients. The most common treatment that is usually done by most of the doctors using it are simply, we just give my COVID combo. which is again the mixture of the cytokines. This is available now in Malaysia and India and even UK. And we have a doctor in Africa also who is using this. So we use our low dose COVID combo. We use that along with Immucil. And then we look at the various factors. So we look at the tongue of the patient. We look if they have smell disturbances. We look at the hair fall. We look if the patient is having depression post-COVID, which means they may most likely be having the ACE2 knocked off in the gut. We look at any B vitamin issues. We look at the tongue again for fungal infections. If the tongue is red, it's fiery red. They're having low B12, they're having low B1, B2. Okay. We look at the nails of the patient. So if your patient is having, the nail bed becoming rough and dry, that's usually a drop in omega-3. So we can give them some omega-3 and it fixes it. So lots of these parameters are there. We look at the liver function tests of these patients. Many of them have high levels of liver inflammation. Here again, Immucil works. So our published paper on Immucil basically shows that it's a strong NOX2 inhibitor. It blocks NOX2 out. We also had Immucil tested by the Center of Genomic Engineering in India. It's a lab which is run by the government. It checks all drugs against COVID. We found Immucil had as much activity as remdesivir did in a Petri dish. Of course, in a human patient, remdesivir doesn't have much activity, but in a Petri dish, it does. Immucil had similar activity to remdesivir. The only advantage was that Immucil had no toxic effects on the cells compared to remdesivir, which did have some toxicity. And in our human patients, we found it works very well. The next aspect of it is Immucil decreases insulin resistance because NOX2 also makes a patient become insulin resistant. So what we found is our patients who were on Immucil, even after they recover from COVID, they didn't want to stop it. So we started asking them, why are you still wanting to take it? So it was basically decreasing the waist size. Their waist was shrinking because the IR was decreasing, the abdominal fat was going off. So our paper now shows that it is very effective against diabetes as well. And since many of the patients who have long COVID end up having elevation in blood sugars, Immucil works very, very well for that. Okay. So that's the end of my long presentation. I have a website in which most of the stuff is free. So it's called as tariqjagmoh.com. You can check it out if you want to. And as I said, there are so many doctors in Malaysia already using this. So you can just contact, maybe there's a distributor there called Amanda. If anybody knows her, you can contact her. Or you can just WhatsApp me. My name is there on the group and I can share her number with you. That's the end of my work. Would you like to ask me any questions? Please do.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Tariq. That was amazing. I'm getting tons of messages privately. People are asking me for your number and how to contact you. So thank you for that. And for all the doctors who are on the Roundtable Telegram group, Dr. Tariq is on our group, and you're welcome to ask him questions there as well, so that all of us can benefit. Because I mean, this was so in-depth and amazing. If there's anybody who has any questions, I'm going to take just one question because Dr. Opferkirk is waiting to start his presentation. If you have a question, you need to have your full name on screen and you have to have your camera on. I will not take questions from somebody who is called Samsung or iPad or iPhone. I just need to know who you are so that I can ask the question. Dr. Tariq, I want to know, are you seeing patients, I know you gave us a lovely presentation on long COVID, and the fact that people who now post-jab, what we are seeing is, like, for example, the fatigue, right? So fatigue is one thing that I'm seeing a lot of in post-jab. So by that, I'm assuming that people who would, the long COVID symptoms would be, we know it's obviously because of the spike protein and of course the sequelae of COVID itself. Do you think that it's going to be the same treatment for people post-jab with the symptoms that you know, they not necessarily had COVID, but they got these symptoms because of the jab?
So let me explain the post-jab symptoms. There are actually three possible etiological factors that cause post-jab issues. The first one is the patient has vasovagal symptoms, where mainly, you know, they have fainting bouts because their vasovagal activity has got disrupted. This happens usually within the first 1 or 2 days of taking the jab. The second one, which is mainly associated with Pfizer, is known as CARPA. Have you heard of CARPA? This is
No.
complement. This is like a complement mediated pseudo allergy. It's called as CARPA because it's complement mediated. So these patients have increased activity of complement C3, C4, and the C3, C4 actually increases histamine levels. So it looks like an allergy. The patient may have a rash, they may have fatigue, they may have vasodilation, but it's not coming from histamine. So your patient is given antihistaminics, they're given corticosteroids, but they don't improve. When CARPA and CARPA can keep progressing on and on and on until your patient gets kidney failure and even dies with it. Okay. So CARPA is mainly caused by the Pfizer vaccine, and we are in part to blame for it because one of the ingredients which Pfizer uses in the vaccine comes from us. So this is basically a phospholipid. So about 42% of all patients who have autoantibodies to phospholipids, which are used in the Pfizer vaccine. Okay. So when you take a Pfizer vaccine, you could have serious problems in developing CARPA. Okay. And without the phospholipid, it's not possible for Pfizer to manufacture their vaccine. It's one of our co-companies that sells it to Pfizer. So yeah, that's how it is how it happens. And the third aspect of it is actually a proper IgE mediated. So IgE can increase in these patients. So this is very different whether when you check this patient's blood, you'll actually find that the IgE level has increased. This happens usually after 1 week. So look at the timeline. Okay, this is after 1 week of the jab. This will happen anywhere between 3 to 5 days after the jab, and this happens within 1 to 2 days of the jab. So we're not just looking at the timing at which the patient has come with, we're also looking at the other factors of the patient. That does this patient have complement activity elevations? Was this patient having an elevated ANE before? Was this patient having a type of an allergy by which his IgE was already raised before? So by looking at this, and again, it's there on my site, we look at these cases very carefully and we subdivide them into various groups by asking questions and by doing lab work. And then we can plan a treatment for them. So there's no protocol for this. You just have to go by what the patient is actually suffering from. In CARPA patients, we found this interesting. We have a homeopathic called as Apis. It's made from bee venom. We use it in a 1M potency and it just treats the CARPA very, very fast. So you should actually read the symptoms of CARPA which are there in patients. I mean, they're quite incredible. You can have anything from kidney failure, heart failure. You can have leaky blood vessels. It's basically in CARPA, the blood vessels become leaky. Fluid starts to come out of them. So your face, your hands, everything becomes swollen. You can start having tachycardia. You start having loss of protein in the urine. So you start having nephropathy. You start losing RBCs in your urine. Your hemoglobin will start to drop. So when you have CARPA, again, keep in mind also the vaccine. So if you've taken Pfizer and you have issues, it could be CARPA. If you've taken, say, a vaccine like Sinovac. Now this Sinovac is a very interesting little guy because they use aluminum inside the vaccine. It acts as an adjuvant. We had several cases after taking Sinovac who've got dementia. The aluminum is not so much that it's going to increase toxic levels of aluminum, but it's your immune reaction to the aluminum which is actually causing the problem. So in such patients who get dementia after Sinovac, we guess what? We give them the homeopathic called as Alumina, which is made from aluminum. And yeah, these patients regain their memory and everything. It all starts coming back to them. So this is how we look at it,
Thank you, Doctor. That's amazing. Do you have anything for the for stupidity? No, I'm just kidding. Because that's what's going. A lot of that is going around, and you seem to have such amazing answers. I mean, perhaps you can do some concoction, and we can, put that in the air or something because of all the non-science that's going around. I mean, you explained yourself so well. I'm definitely going to call on you for our next summit. The one I spoke about in mid-Jan. That we're going to be organizing. So thank you so much. Absolutely amazing. And so glad that you are on our group, and all of the doctors who are here or those healthcare practitioners who want to ask Dr. Tariq any questions, you can ask him on the chat here or even on our roundtable discussion. I'm sure he'll be able to answer your questions there because, I'm just looking at all of the presentations. Everybody is doing such phenomenal work in each of their own right. And it just reminds me of this picture that I have in my head. It's like we are all puzzle pieces in this disarray, and only when we come together can we see the picture nice and whole again. So thank you so much for that, Dr. Tariq.